Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Top Women in EV panel on International Women's Day 2023. So I'm Lindsay Brown, Head of Business Development at Green TV Media. So we are the company behind EV Summit, Top Women in EV, as well as World EV Day, EV Live at Blenheim Palace, and we're the communications agency behind campaigns such as the Volta Trucks launch. So today we'll be discussing embracing equality and how we encourage more women to join the EV transition. So joining me today is a fantastic panel of e-mobility experts who just happen to be women. So Erin Baker is an award-winning automotive journalist and editorial director at Auto Trader UK. Ginny Buckley is founder and CEO of electrifying.com. She's also a journalist and presenter for the likes of the BBC and ITV. Laura Lancaster is Vice President of EV Networks and Partnerships at FLEETCOR. And Loredana Negriu is Global Product Manager for ABB e-mobility. So thank you all so much for joining us today for International Women's Day. So the theme of this year's campaign is embracing equity. So to get the world talking about why equal opportunities aren't enough. We know that people start from different places. So does true inclusion and belonging require equitable action? So looking at equal opportunities versus positive discrimination. So Ginny, I'm going to start with you. How important do you think this is to the electric vehicle sector?
Let's start with a big one, shall we? Because this is a massive question, isn't it? I think we could probably do half an hour on this between us all. Look, I think let's start off by saying it's clear that automotive, the EV sector, automotive in general, needs more women. We are massively underrepresented. I think in comparison to other industries, around 13% of the workforce and only 10% of the executives identify as women. And I think what's really worrying actually is there's two things here. So there's how do we get more women into the industry, but how do we also keep them and retain them? So there was a really interesting piece of work done by Deloitte, I think it was towards the end of last year, and only half of the women that we've got in the industry now said they feel ready to adapt to the changes that are coming. About 40% of women working in automotive say they would choose a different career path if they were starting again, and 90% felt they were underrepresented in leadership positions. So I think that in itself is a really massive issue. So first of all, yes, of course, we do need to bring more women into automotive. And how do we do that? Well, I'm very proud that at my business, electrifying.com, we're fronted by two women, and we have a very even split within the team. It's pretty much 50-50, but we're a small company, so that's a lot easier for us to do. There's only 11 of us in the company. So I think that's a challenge in itself. I think what we have to do is really try to be flexible. For women, we need to have women in positions that they can see and they look up to. We have to have female role models. We need to try and be flexible and supportive of women on their journey throughout work. You know, there's no surprise that we lose a lot of women when they go off to have children. We've got to be more flexible as an industry, and it's not something that generally in automotive that we're very good at doing. I think if we look at what your question was, which is, you know, what's this debate around equal opportunities versus positive discrimination? And I guess on this point, I'm coming to it as an employer, but also as the trustee of a charity. So I'm the trustee of Manchester United's Charitable Foundation, and we work with children and young people from really disadvantaged communities. And through that work, I see so much talent that is lost, both with girls and young women, but also with boys and with young men. And it's talent that's lost to our industry because they simply don't have those role models and opportunities. So I think with that hat on, I do have a struggle with positive discrimination to bring more women into the industry. I think there are ways that we can do it. I know, Erin, I'm sure we'll talk about a brilliant project that you run. Certainly within the foundation with the young people that we work with, we do run projects for our female participants only. So we'll run STEM focused events. We did a brilliant event with the Hidden Figures film where we had women leaders there across aerospace, automotive, science and technology. And the only audience there in that event was female. So I think doing those kind of things to show women that they have a rightful place in our industry and that there are positive role models for them to look up to and learn from is really important. But do I agree with female-only quotas right across the board? I probably don't personally. I'll caveat that though, just one quick final point by saying I do agree with it on board positions, because I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that if you have strong female role models on a board, that has a really positive impact right throughout the company. Yeah, I don't know what the rest of you think on that one. Quite a lot of points in that answer of mine.
There's a lot to cover, as you said.
Yeah, there is.
I think that's really interesting if we get into that idea of that senior level and board members. Laura, I know that you had a similar experience at your company about that sort of 50-50 split.
Yeah, so we certainly in our EV team, we're close to 50% split as well, and our sales organisation is 50% split at all staff as well. So I think there's certain areas where that is easier to achieve in, marketing and sales and, in business development type areas. But there's obviously parts of the industry where that's going to be more difficult to achieve. But then, if we talk about this, like in terms of the equity piece, about where everyone starts off and where, everyone's, having sort of certain levels in the organisation, when we say 50% have to be female, actually it's more about how we make sure that everyone gets that same opportunity coming through and the same development needs. But I think EV is quite a good industry in terms of that backgrounds. There's such a diverse industry in terms of you can come in through entry points in traineeships, or there's apprenticeships available, or you can come in via university, because there's such a range of jobs from like installers to engineers to corporate sales, marketing. I think it's got quite a bit of opportunity in letting people from different backgrounds come in.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think that's the case. Loredana, do you find that on that kind of more global side? Are you seeing that in your kind of European operations? The kind of split between male and female, is it 50-50? Is there skewed one way or the other?
I think there is definitely room for improvement. So, and I very much like to listen to, Virginia and Laura. They have such a great experience in this, and all of the points they raised are super good. I mean, I think what I would add on is, and what I really liked is the fact that when you're talking about diversity and when you're talking about, women engagement and all of that, ultimately, I think we should be talking about diversity point, and then ultimately giving way to, role models to further show the your place, regardless of your gender or what you identify, regardless of your preferences. You should have a place in any organization, right? And I think this is it starts, to some extent with women, but it should go well beyond, and it does go well beyond. So and ultimately what it does enable, indeed, so we should all look for same opportunities, right? Same development needs, but also we should look to recognize and identify that each individual has individual needs, and each individual has individual ways to grow and individual ways to manifest its best self. And I think regardless if it's corporate or entrepreneurial, whatever you are, we should build an environment where or we should strive to have an environment where everybody has the sense of belonging, and then also where they feel that they can be their best selves as they are, regardless of how they want to as they are, period, without fitting to a particular let's say narrow path.
Definitely. And Erin, I know you've got a slightly different view on this with your project. Erin's having some problems. It snowed where most of us are today, which is a shock in March. So Erin, if you can hear us, if you want to let us know a bit about your project that is sort of working in that sort of slightly positive discrimination.
Do you know, Lindsay, I'm so sorry. It's still just not working. I don't know if you guys can hear me very well. If so, could you repeat the question?
Yes, we can hear you. Wanted to ask about your project in terms of women in the motoring journalism industry.
Yeah, women in motoring journalism for sure. So we've got a really narrow margin. It's just awful in automotive journalism. The gender gap is huge. There are about 250 motoring journalists in the UK. That's not including influencers. and about 10 to 15 of those are women. So we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm keen on widening that pipeline as quickly as possible. So we've done a couple of things, one of which I know is pretty contentious at Auto Trader. We've launched a female content creation internship, which we've just had our first one complete her year, Hannah Hill, and she's now a graduate on staff with us, which is absolutely great. It's positive discrimination, I suppose, if you want to look at it like that. You know, the internship is only open to women, which raises a few eyebrows, understandably. But I think if we were to open it up to everyone, we would risk getting a very good man in, and then we wouldn't be doing anything to narrow the gender gap. And it's really critical that we do, because without content created by women, without female bylines, without women in front of the camera, without women on radio, without women in above the line advertising or social media or marketing communications, women consumers are going to think, well, where am I? I'm not represented in this industry. Why would I engage with this brand or buy this product if I don't see a woman spearheading that product, driving that sale? So I think automotive journalism is a really important part of equity across the board.
I think, yeah, just to pick up on that, I mean, the project that Erin's run is absolutely brilliant, you know, and it has, I know she's produced some, you know, found some fantastic talent. And I think I completely agree. There's far too many of us. Far too few of us. I've been in this industry for 26 years, and there were probably about the same number of female motoring journalists then as there are now. And we really do need to get more of us into that industry. I think what's been interesting for me is with my brand, I really wanted to establish a brand that would talk more to a female audience. And so we've put 2 women at the heart of the brand. It's fronted by 2 females. We have a good female split across the brand. And actually, we enjoy a really strong female audience. So across the sector, if I look at some competitor brands, we outstrip them by quite a large number. So, and it's like Erin just said, it makes sense. Women will engage if they can. We've all said this, role models. You know, if you want opinion from other women, you know, we can't have the lion's share of the voice in this sector belonging to men, because you're doing women a disservice.
I think this all moves us really on nicely onto our next question. So the one place we do see equity, I think, is, as we've said, is in marketing, actually. So a lot of car companies are advertising their electric vehicles with women and families. So we're seeing it on our screens more. But does this translate to women wanting to buy those cars? So Erin, I know you've got some really interesting research on this. You know, are electric vehicles more popular than women, than sort of traditional ICE cars? Are there barriers that women are facing, and is this different to how men feel?
Yes, sorry, again, Lindsay, you cut out, but I'm going to take a stab at your question, which is around EVs and women and take-up versus male take-up of EVs and ICE and so on. It's a fascinating one, because, you know, if you stick your finger in the air, I would have naturally assumed that women would be more engaged with electric vehicles than men, because it's a sustainable product. The sustainability messaging is a really something that women are engaged with in other areas and other industries and products. But the fresh data that we've got, certainly at Auto Trader, where we've been doing a lot of qualitative and quantitative research in the last year, shows that women are massively disengaged from the entire electric car theme. You know, 67% of women don't know about 2030 is the cutoff point for the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. Women don't like this idea of buying a product that is kind of very techy, very early adopter, that is full of software. Women are very risk heightened, not risk averse, but more risk heightened in their purchases. So they immediately start thinking around electric cars. What happens if I run out of charge on the motorway with the kids in the back, which doesn't tend to be the first thing that male motorists think about. They think a crucial point, an absolutely crucial stat, is that most women think that electric cars are actually more expensive to run than petrol or diesel cars, whereas we know that the only way really at the moment, given that they cost on average 36% more than their petrol or diesel counterparts, the only way they make financial sense is with those lower running costs. So if women aren't aware of that, why on earth would they go out and buy one? So there's a huge job to be done, and Ginny's organisation does a great deal of good in this area. You know, we have to get the messaging out, the broad messaging about the lifestyle change, about the beautiful products and the fantastic brands. We have to get that message out to women where they are. You know, we can't wait for them to be in market for their next car. You know, OEMs, the government, media, we have to go out to them in verticals where they naturally are strong, like well-being, travel, food and drink, family, leisure. And we have to talk to them there about electric cars, or we're not going to narrow that gender gap anytime soon. And actually, if we did manage to do that, we think, looking at the data, that actually women could be the key to unlocking mass adoption of electric cars, because there are so many women motorists on the road. They're gaining at a faster rate. More women are getting their driving licenses than men at the moment. So if you extrapolate the data, you might say even by 2030, we'd be looking at women as the majority purchaser of cars and motorists. So we need to pick up the pace on this.
I mean, I'll just pick up on one point you mentioned at the top, Lindsay, about we're seeing more women in marketing. And just to give you an example of how we might be, but I don't think in necessarily the right places. So we have one commercial partner, I'm not going to name them, but they're a large global automotive brand, and we are a female fronted brand. It's really important for me that all our imagery features women, and out of all their image banks, they couldn't find one shot for me that there was a company that was one of their official press shots of a female hand or a woman charging a car. There wasn't one that existed at all. So actually, once you start to, and this will be something that Erin will have experienced as well, once you start to look into and really drill down, often the way a woman is, you know, you don't often see pictures of women behind the wheel really enjoying driving a fast car, for example, in the press shots. That's not what you get. Quite often we'll get video B-roll, we call it, which we might use to edit videos that the car brands have produced. It will always be a man driving in that. So it's like Erin said, it's got to happen at every single step of the way in order to get this positive change. It really has. So, and just one thing, just to pick up on Erin's point as well, we've done a lot of looking in this area as well, and in data, and we did a big piece of work with the AA here in the UK. We talked to 18,000 drivers, and 56% of female drivers said they just didn't feel as confident in driving an electric car as they did a petrol or diesel. It wasn't that much less with men, it was around 42, but there's definitely a difference there.
Interesting. I know at Green TV, you know, we do a lot of video production, we do digital marketing, and we work very hard to make sure we are inclusive of women and diversity in general. There is B-roll out there. I know that there is some, but definitely not enough. Loredana, did you have a point on this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one other item that, you know, I also already see a change in is the messaging around EV and the EV experience overall, right? So it needs to go around the values that, and, you know, that EV or the transition, you know, to non-IC is bringing. And that's, you know, and that will definitely be heard more also by women, and I do expect that it will definitely increase adoption, right? So I've been driving an EV for quite some time now. I love it, and my husband hates it, by the way. He just sees nuisances all along, you know. So the range, you know, the fact that, you know, he cannot, I mean, the engine, of course, we're all good that we cannot hear it anymore, but there are all these different points, right, that he'd rather want to have an IC than an EV. Of course, it's just one example, but definitely I think if we look at the message further than just the technical specs, in terms of, okay, the speed, the iteration, the whatever else it is, right? I think there, if you go beyond that, you will definitely get, you know, you'll definitely be able to be better heard by women.
I really like that personal story there. Laura, I know you've got a really different perspective on this in terms of fleets and business drivers. So what are you seeing there? Yeah, so
you know, I think we have to also look about who are buying the vehicles, and currently, I think the SMMT last year put out that 2/3 of new EVs are actually being bought by businesses and fleets in the UK, for example. So we need to look at which those businesses are and who's buying it. And from our experience at All-Star, You know, we've got customers using our products like BT, Centrica, Sky, Virgin Media, and various public sector businesses. And when you look at those industries, a lot of them are the operational fleets or vans in the maintenance and service industry, which are very male dominated, you know, with the engineers and installers and things like that in those industries. So in that part, there's obviously not many women with the cars through that part of the sector. However, when you look at the company car fleets, they have, I think, a bit more of an equal share, because you've got then you're looking at sales forces and consultancy companies and service industries, which I think are a bit more representative by females in those fleets. You know, and I was sort of asking around in the office and getting a bit of a gut feel of what we see is how many women are using our services. We probably think it's more like the 20 to 30% of females are represented in that. But I think that's again because of the companies that are buying the vehicles and those that are down the EV transition more so.
Interesting.
Really interesting. So moving on to the next area, I suppose, you know, we're seeing women perhaps getting into company cars, you know, we're starting to perhaps see favour Loredana, as you said, and we are doing work in the marketing, you know, Ginny and Erin. You know, do we think this is going to translate to women in the industry? You know, are we going to be encouraging women to take roles in the sector? Laura, you know, what are your thoughts here? You know, how do we promote women to actually work with EVs?
Yeah, and I think part of it's about marketing, but I think it's also about, you know, how we, you know, I think it's more about us being role models in the industry. You know, I still go to so many events and so many, you know, panelist discussions, and there's still men all over the stage, but there's lots of women in the crowd. So we need to get women out of the shadows when we're in the EV industry and more in the public limelight. And we don't need to do it on International Women's Day. We need to do that every day of the year. And I think when you start seeing women in the industry, you know, even pictures in the industry and through advertising, but also in actual events, I think that helps bring the profile of women up. And then you can look at it and go, well, they're there, I can do that too. So I think that's sort of the next thing of how we can work and make sure that we, you know, support our colleagues in the transit, and you know, being open and in the public eye. And I think secondly, then, like, how do we think about the next generation? You know, young adults are very much about sustainability. There's a lot of people coming to interviews and things now where if they don't agree with the company and the ethos, they won't take the job, which is very different, I think, when we were younger. You know, you took a job where you weren't so picky. But we've got this great generation coming up who, you know, EV is perfect for them. So how do we make sure that we, you know, educate schools and colleges and universities to see that there's opportunities in the EV and what it provides to bring women up that way?
Definitely, really interesting. Ginny, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a few different routes that we can support and help. And I think, you know, Laura's talked about that importance of role models. That keeps coming back, doesn't it? I think we can talk, though. I think things like this are a really good starting off point. And I would encourage anyone who's watching to go and have these discussions with the women that you work with, you know, to find out how you can support them. You know, it's really important that we help other people, you know, progress in this industry as well. We need support networks. We need allies. But I think we've also got to really look at the women we've got within the industry, and that figure from that Deloitte report that I mentioned at the top, which was, I think, was 40% don't feel confident now with the change that's coming. Reskilling is really important, and training. So we've got to make sure that we equip the brilliant women that we've got in this industry to cope with what's coming next, and not just accept that they're okay with that. And then I think the other thing that we just need to do as employers generally is to rethink that whole work-life balance. You know, it comes up time and time again, doesn't it? When you talk particularly to women, you know, it's shocking. We've all seen those studies. You know, working women still take on the bulk of the childcare, you know, the bulk of the household chores. I'm a single parent, so I end up doing it all. But, you know, there are a lot of challenges. And it's not just parenting, it's maternity leave. It's offering people flexi working if they've got to support elderly parents. It's thinking about the menopause. You know, I went through that and worked, and it wasn't, you know, felt dreadful a lot of the time. It's about having those conversations organizations, and just really thinking of us as individuals. And I think it was, sorry, Loredana, you said, you know, you've got to think about everybody as an individual. And I think that's how we support women in this industry. We all have a lot going on, and there's a lot of different things going on with us.
Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, Loredana, I know you said something to me about, you know, it's about community, it's about encouraging, as you said, that individualism in the workplace.
Yeah, I see Erin has her hand up. I would like to very much go on, Virginia, but I'd like to give the...
Oh, sorry, I only because I'm just so invisible at the moment and I can't hear anything anyone's saying, but I have a very good point to make on this, if people can still hear me, which is that talking about visibility. I went to Cardiff University last week to talk to, again, attack that pipeline of female media students right at the heartland on their media course. They run a fantastic master's, but it's one of the best masters in the country for media postgrads, but it's not automotive specific. And I thought, I want to go and speak to the women on that media course and find out if any of them are interested in automotive journalism and if I can change their minds. And I went in at the beginning of that session and there were 20 of the brightest media postgrads in the country that are women, and not one of them was remotely interested in a career in automotive. They had dismissed, well, most of them hadn't even considered it, weren't aware of it. You know, they all wanted to go into news journalism or travel or sport or culture or theatre, food and drink. And I spoke to them for half an hour about automotive journalism and said, it's so much more than just working on a bloke's petrol heady magazine. You know, I do the cars for Vogue, I do the cars for Marie Claire. There's me, there's Ginny Buckley, there's these fantastic, sexy, gorgeous women in the industry who are really intelligent and passionate and really good at what they do. And, you know, Ginny and I are both single mums and we juggle it and it's so hard, but we love it and we're supported by wonderful colleagues. And I said, and also you get amazing travel and hotels. Anyway, at the end of it, I said, you don't worry if you don't even know anything about cars. That will come. You can fake it to make it, no problem. But you've got to have those core brilliant journalism skills. And I said, all you wonderful women have got those. I can see you have. And by the end of it, I had 15 women want to become automotive journalists. If I hadn't gone, but it, you know, it kind of made me so upset, because if I hadn't gone last week and spoken to them, that's 15 incredible women who wouldn't have gone anywhere near this industry. It wouldn't have even been on their radar. And who might we miss out on? And so yes, it's about visibility, 100%.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, that's really informative. I mean, not surprised you managed to convince 15 out of 20 that your career is fantastic, because I know you're a great advocate for this sector. Loredana.
Yeah, no, just quickly on Erin's point, I think there are definitely perceived barriers to entry, right? And I think those barriers to entry is something that we can work to break down a little bit. And this all coming, you know, from how the industry is built, you know, but ultimately, I think this is, if you know, going back to, if you have role models, if you have more women present talking about, you know, the importance of their role, what they're doing, what is the motivator, what drives them, how they are felt, you know, seen within the organization in terms of, you know, their needs and their impact, I think then is where you can already, you know, brick by brick, you know, tear down these barriers to entry. And also, I think another point that I really like what Virginia said was, you know, we need to be able to talk about what's going on. We need to be able to talk about, you know, what our challenges are. We need to be able to talk if we have, you know, imposter syndrome, and share this, you know, points with other women around us, or other men around us, or other people around us, right? And get that level of communication flow going, and that will definitely help build this environment of inclusion ultimately.
Fantastic. So let's end on a positive note, and just talk about, you know, what progress, what change have we seen, you know, in the industry over the last few years. You know, where have we seen that actually there are, you know, fantastic women in leadership as there are on this panel today? So Loredana, I'll start with you.
I mean, definitely I see it within ABB mobility, right? We have more and more women in leadership positions. That is brilliant, right? We have inclusion at different levels, our voices being heard at different levels. We really are keen on diversity, and we're promoting that, and we have different means that as an organization, you know, we're aiming to grow in that sense. But also outside of ABB, I do see, change, and I do see an increase in the presence of women within the industry in different trade shows or, communications, product management, whatnot. So there is a trend, right? That does not mean we should be very much relaxed about it. So I think, this is this type of events that we're having now, and the focus that we're putting on it, and the different actions that these wonderful ladies are taking, are definitely very much needed still. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Laura, yourself, what positive change have you seen?
Yeah, I think I think the COVID piece of working from home and the flexible working that's come around from that has been a huge help for me personally, for example, of being able to be home and helping with the kids and do pickups from after school clubs and things like that. So I think there's been a really positive change in society the last few years and really helped women, I think, in that regard. And as you said, organisations are very much more aware of this. I used to work for Shell, and Shell had an amazing, structure and mentoring program for women. And like a lot of large organisations have this. So I guess it's also how we sort of take some of those great practices and some of the large corporates and bring that into some of the smaller startups and smaller businesses that are currently in EV. So there's probably my two bits what I've seen change a lot.
Fantastic. And Erin, yourself?
Well, 20 years ago when I started on the motoring desk at the Telegraph, there were, like Ginny alluded to, there were so few of us. I used to go on international car launches to test drive cars and be not even patronized, I was just ignored. Everyone was so cliquey. If you weren't writing for one of the main blokey mags, then people just assumed you knew nothing about cars. And actually I didn't know anything about cars, but I was a really good journalist. I knew that. I'd been a graduate on the Telegraph's national newspaper journalism scheme. So I wish I'd been more confident, and the positive change I've seen since then is just more women in the industry. And even though we've still got so far to go, I look around, I'm on this panel today, there are a handful of us that are always on launches and support each other and know each other, and the men are more supportive too. Not supportive, the men are just more respectful. They just treat you like an equal now, and I didn't have that 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think I would just completely agree with what Erin said. I remember starting off sort of 26 years ago when I did my first launch, and one of the male journalists asked me to top his wine up for him. Those things do still happen, but they happen in other industries. As a female founder, I get patronised. I get patronised in the work I do at the BBC. So sadly, that is just something that happens. I think just coming back to Erin's point, the big change I've seen actually is in the attitudes of the men in this industry. I've worked alongside some brilliant supportive men who have been fantastic throughout my career, and some brilliant women as well. Wish there were more of the women. But what I see now is much more conversation amongst my male colleagues about how do we get more women in? What do we do to improve the gender balance? And I think we need these male allies, all the guys out there listening. You have such an important role to play in this journey. We've got to do this together. And it's going to make sense for this industry. There is evidence that shows that gender diversity enhances innovation by as much as 20%. And my goodness, this industry has got to innovate over the coming years. So let's make sure we've got, an equal gender balanced workforce to help us do that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your expertise and sharing your thoughts today. I wish we could continue, but that is all the time we have. But hopefully, I really think this conversation will inspire others in the industry and hopefully people moving into e-mobility. So thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you again very soon.